Okay, welcome. This is Andy McNeil and Misty Hale with another version of Y'all Hear About This. Misty, how you doing on Halloween Day today?
I'm great. Happy Halloween, Andy.
Yeah, likewise. Are you going to expect any trick-or-treaters at your house?
I'm going to a football game, so if they come by, they're going to be disappointed.
I sort of noticed that, here we're kind of where we live, everybody sort of goes to certain neighborhoods. So those neighborhoods get totally overwhelmed. So the last few years, I've always gone to those neighborhoods with people that are like handing out candy. But
That's good.
where I live, there won't be really too many folks. But, but hopefully your football team wins.
Yeah. Hey, we've only lost one this season.
So well, I hope you guys win. So,
Thanks.
so what have you been thinking about? What have you heard about?
Well, let's start with something kind of light. And then I think you and I both have some serious stuff today. So first of all, I want to say congratulations to the Dierks community in Arkansas. They won a nationwide contest where they're going to get $1 million to redo their high school football field.
The football field, it's a staple in the community. It's the one place in Dierks, Arkansas that you can find every single person on a Friday night.
When I first heard that our school had applied, I was thinking, there's no way. I mean, we're just this speck in the state and nobody's going to notice us. And now that we've made it this far, the energy is incredible.
I think the people in this town have been given a feeling from T-Mobile of being seen. I think when you are from a small town, it's okay to play astronaut and rock star in the backyard until a certain age, and then they tell you to grow up and move on. But I think our kids feel like it's okay trying to fight for those dreams.
Congratulations, Dierks High School.
Cool.
I think it's so awesome because Dierks is in Hector's football classification. So they're very small, not a lot of extra money in the budget for stuff like that. And I think they said they hadn't done anything to their football field in like 20, 30 years. So it really needs it.
I'm curious because you're going to these different football fields at a different classification. Are most of them, dirt fields that are, have a lot of like dirt spots as opposed to grass?
Not really. Though I will say I think we were in Yellville, and in the middle of the game, their sprinkler system came on the field. So the guy was like about to kick a field goal and the sprinklers came on. I mean, by and large, they're pretty good. I mean, they're not like, I went to Elkins and Greenwood. If you go to either of those stadiums, it's like you're at like Arkansas Tech, like you're at a college level field. But like most of the people we play, they're fine, but they're not, amazing.
Interesting. Well, that's pretty cool that they want to, because like you said, they're pretty expensive. These average fields, these high school fields are, I don't know today's dollars, but when we were part of replacing Russellville's fields, like it's $800,000, right? For a small high school, that is a big deal.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. Like for the $1 million, he's like, we're not doing bells and whistles. He's like, we need new stadium lights. We need new grass. We need it leveled. Like that's going to cost $1 million. And the coolest thing about the Dierks thing, and I'm probably saying it wrong. I think some people say more like Dierks. I'm not really sure. I'm probably getting it wrong, and I apologize if I am. Dierks got 1.9 million votes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's sort of like
crazy.
It's sort of like you have to go out and gin up support out in the the ecosystem of whatever it was, like a crowdsource voting.
Yes, it is.
Got it.
And I thought that was a crazy number because there are 3 million people in Arkansas. So that would basically mean like 2 out of every 3 people in Arkansas, which again, I know it was nationwide, but still that was huge for them to get that amount of votes for a little small town from Arkansas. And it just made me so proud of how our whole state came together to promote.
So what's your serious thing that you've noticed?
Okay. Well, we're going to go down one of my conservative rabbit holes here. And you may or may not agree with me, Andy, but I think that we're kind of aligned on some financial policies. I want to talk about how we have had all this pandemic funding that was released by the federal government that was really meant to be temporary. But temporary aid like that can reshape the market and people's expectations. And it can make it really hard to then pull back and go back to normal aid levels after that because people have reshaped their lives around the expectation of that funding. So the case study in particular that I want to talk about is Arkansas having to restructure its childcare voucher program because the federal funding for the childcare community development block grants, it dropped about $10 million this year. But to put that into context, like in the recent years, that program had received $137 million. And now it's down to about $127 million. But back in 2019, Arkansas got around $81 million in federal funding for the childcare programs. Now, I will give you this caveat saying it's not exactly apples to apples because some of those funding programs, you know how over 6 years, buckets are going to change, right? But I would also say a lot of those buckets probably came into being because of the increased funding that was coming through as well. Like, I think of it like this. Like, if you get a raise at work, right? Most people don't actually find after that raise that they have that much more money at the end of the day just sitting in their bank account. Like, they find places to spend that money, right?
Of course.
You know how
that's true.
You adjust your budget to your income often. So, like a family that was maybe spending $500 or $600 a month on childcare, right? And then the government comes along and they're like, hey, you know what? We got that. You don't have to pay that anymore.
And when we're talking about childcare, are we talking about it in the form of I'm a parent in need and I get government assistance that I then turn around and use to take care of my children while I'm at work, presumably?
Yeah. So this is money that generally goes directly to the child care provider. Okay. And this particular program is geared for parents who are working or who are in education programs, training programs. Okay. Yeah. And it's paid directly to the child care provider. So a lot of those families, the government was like, hey, we'll take that off your plate. They said yes. And of course, they rebudget that money for other things in their lives. And then now that, I mean, again, it's $10 million that has been scaled back. And so the state's looking at, you know, we can't reimburse these childcare providers the same amount that we were before. And they're looking at having some families do co-pays to try to pay for that.
Okay.
Now, in the grander scheme of things, it's really, I shouldn't say it's not that much money. It probably is a lot of money to some families. But let's say you had a family of three. If they made between $30,000 and $65,000 a year, they would pay like potentially a copay of up to $12 a day.
Okay.
Which would equate to maybe around like $250 a month or something like that. You know,
so that's happening because the state just doesn't have the money,
right? Because the federal government took out around $10 million. But again, what they're getting is still $50 million more than they were getting pre-pandemic, right? So we have broadened our budgets and we have increased expectations among citizens so much during this floodgates of pandemic spending that was put out there. And now, and I also think that a lot of the pandemic stuff, they were pet programs that politicians had had for a really long time that they had wanted to do. And I think some of those people were like, well, this is temporary. Well, no, you know how hard it is to take things away from people once you give it to them. It's darn near impossible. And it's really hard. Like, it's a very hard vote for politicians to make to say, oh, we're going to scale back that funding. And it's very unpopular. And you get all these sob stories. And you know me, Andy, I think the media has a liberal bias. So they highlight what is a challenge instead of saying, hey, you know, this program is not sustainable for the taxpayers. Yeah. So I think it's a quandary that everybody's in. And I feel for everybody across the board, the child care providers, the parents, it's just a hard position for everybody to be in.
So you're suggesting that sunsetting provisions never get to sunset because everybody gets very accustomed to them.
Yeah.
You know, and look no further than to, you know, the tax breaks of the 2017, you know, tax, you know, and then what we just did here recently. Everybody gets very accustomed to those, and you end up with consequences, right? That you got to deal with one way or the other, you know. And so either, you know, people have to spend more money, or, you know, or just it's whatever. Yeah, interesting. So I guess you're reading about that here on the paper here and there.
Yeah, it's been in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette a lot. Spent a lot of time researching it. And I feel like so often we think government is the answer to problems. And I think government is usually the problem, not the answer. So like when you talk about tax cuts, sunsetting, I'm like, no. Let's leave those because again, I don't think the government needs the money. I think they're usually not the answer.
Is even true on taxes. So, like if you typically vote something in, it's hard to actually get it sunsetting, right? Because everybody will say, and I know that's sort of true around our 1 cent sales tax, for a long time here locally. And so I actually noticed something about politics too this week. I noticed that there's continued discussion around the filibuster and, and should we change the filibuster or not? And I thought it may make sense just to sort of give a little history and then, to kind of come up to a point. So, the Constitution doesn't mention the word filibuster. So originally the Senate and the House had a rule, and it was called the previous question motion. And it was basically a way for the majority to cut off debate so that you just couldn't get into a cycle of endless debate. And in 1806, Aaron Burr, who was presiding over the Senate, eliminated the rule because he assumed that that gentlemen, as he quoted it at the time, wouldn't abuse this unlimited debate. Because, of course, the idea is that if I say I'm going to debate, I can just unlimitedly debate and until everybody runs out of time. Okay, so it created the potential for unlimited debate. And it was used very rarely. So it was used in the 1830s for people that opposed Andrew Jackson. And then during World War I, a group of folks used it to block Woodrow Wilson when he was trying to arm merchant ships. And so he got a little upset, and he ended up pushing through the Senate a rule that basically said you could allow cloture, which is basically ending debate, if there was a 2/3 vote of the Senate, which is 67 senators. Okay. So, but it required you to physically filibuster, right? You had to sit there on the House floor and people had to and so famously Strom Thurmond in the 1950s, basically had a record 24-hour and 18-minute filibuster on the Civil Rights Bill. And even the 64 Civil Rights Bill passed after 60 days of senators filibustering. And that was the longest filibuster at the point. In the 1970s, we changed it again. So instead of 2/3 vote, we did it to 3/5 vote, which is 60 senators to do anything. But they also adopted a 2-track system. So the way that it worked is you no longer had to actually physically get down there and talk. You could just raise your hand and say, hey, I'm filibustering this. And it essentially would shut down debate it would shut down anything if you didn't have 60 people. That, of course, in our world of no one getting along, that meant that the gears of government ground down. And Harry Reid, who is the Democratic Senate lead, and in 2013, he changed it so the cloture was 51 votes related to executive and judicial nominees, except the Supreme Court. And then Mitch McConnell changed that in 17 to allow for but today, all general legislation needs, 60 votes to overcome any filibuster. So that's the history real quick. What I sort of think is and what I hope they keep the filibuster. I realize that Trump is calling for that to be the ending. And the reason is that I hate the idea that we're going to have seesaw politics, because as soon as you have 51 votes, you're going to see people, abortion's outlawed, it's allowed. It's outlawed, it's allowed. You're going to go back and forth, whoever's got 51 votes for particular legislation. And I think that it means that you don't have to compromise, you don't have to deal with the other side. I think in the long run, that's all bad for us, and so.
But you are pro filibuster.
I'm pro filibuster in the sense that we've got to have some mechanism where people have to work together, So from what I understand, listening to certain senators, there's not a chance that they're going to change it. But I don't know. Trump could put a lot of pressure on people.
See, I don't feel like they are working together, though. I feel like we constantly get in these stalemates, and then I don't see that the filibuster is really helpful. So you're just not able to get things done.
Yeah. I guess the counter to that is you'll get things done, but we may not all like the outcomes. You know, it may, you know, we may like them half the time, and the other half the time we don't like them.
See, I prefer action and chaos to the stalemate. And that's just a difference in, you know, again, that's a preference. I'm not saying that that's right or it's wrong, but I think the wild, you know, democracy side of it is, well, if you elect in a majority of this party, then they should be able to enact the policies that the people elected them to do. Yeah. Either side. If you're a Democrat, great. If you're a Republican, great. But I don't like being able to hamstring the majority. Yeah, because of a rule that actually
be careful
not
what
in the
we
Constitution.
Be careful what we wish for, you know. And so, you know, and so we'll just see. We'll see how this goes. So, I hope your football game, you guys win it tonight.
Yeah, me too. We're playing Conway Christian, and you know, those private schools are usually hard to beat. So
they're hard to beat. Well, hopefully you guys take them. And that's a wrap for y'all hear about this.
Happy Halloween.